Earth? I'll give you the answer. Concrete. This is the Concrete Logic Podcast. Have you ever stopped to think about the sidewalks, driveways, bridges, or the buildings around you? They're all made from concrete. So why don't we discuss it more? In each episode of Concrete Logic, we'll explore a unique concrete-related topic with the help of industry professionals shaping the trade's future. We'll talk with suppliers, contractors, architects, engineers, specialists, and even proponents of competing materials. We'll get their views on concrete and their visions for its future. So get ready to mix things up with Concrete Logic, where we turn the spotlight on the material that's everywhere but often overlooked. This is the Concrete Logic Podcast. And now, here's your host, Seth Tandit.
And welcome to another episode of the Concrete Logic Podcast. And today I have Jarett Gross. He's from the Automate Construction, and really, to me personally, Jarett is he's kind of on the forefront of integrating automation and construction. And when I want to see what's going on with 3D printing, I always check on what Jarett's up to. So I'm happy to have him on the show today.
Thanks so much for having me, Seth. It's integrating is a really strong word. I mostly try just to film what other people are integrating. But I do get the opportunity to see incredible projects demonstrating the evolution of construction around the world, mostly in the States over the past year, probably the next year too. I think the U.S. has a hotspot for construction automation and startup funding at the moment. But I'm really trying to create a historical library of the evolution of construction from where it started with 2x4s to where it's going with robots, maybe one day humanoid robots, maybe one day some even bigger robots built by the humanoid robots. So I don't know if I'll be alive to see the end of that transition where you press a button and build a whole home, but we're seeing it unfold in front of us. And my goal is to track that. I'm not the integrator, just the camera guy.
Yeah, I would call you a journalist. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah.
So we're going to talk about that today. And just to remind folks how the podcast works, if you really enjoyed the conversation today with Jarett, please share the podcast with a colleague, coworker, somebody in the industry. And then the other things you could do is if you go to the concretelogicpodcast.com homepage, there's a couple ways you can get a hold of me. There's a contact button. You click on that and you can send me an email, or there's a microphone in the bottom right hand side of the homepage as well. And that you click on that and you can leave me a voicemail. And what we're looking for there is topic suggestions or guest suggestions. So reach out and let me know what you want to hear on the podcast. And then the last way, as always, there's the on the same homepage on concretelogicpodcast.com, there's a donation page. So you click on that and you can donate any amount. We don't have, paywalls or anything like that. We just put out these podcasts and look for you guys to give us some kind of value back if you got some value out of the podcast. So that's how the podcast works. So Jarett, after I butchered your name and your introduction, let's get into it. So Jarett, if you could, I guess, could you give us your definition of? This might sound silly to you, but what is 3D printing in your view, in your eyes?
Very important place to start, I think. And I would even deconstruct the question as far as 3D printing is applied to all these different technologies, and it's really a misnomer because they're all so different from each other. So trying to group them all into one category, even things that are 3D printed, obviously, like coming out of an extruder head, wet material that becomes solid, that may look the same, but one may be an endothermic reaction, whereas the other is an exothermic reaction. That's a key distinction between plastic, concrete, geopolymers would be on this side. Any kind of bio-based PLA, ABS, anything you would heat up, it requires heat to melt the thing you're printing and then deposit it, and then it cools off, as opposed to the concrete is a chemical reaction releasing heat from the mixture of the water and the cement. So it's really foolish, I think, to compare both in the same category in any way. And you see some groups doing permitting, American standards organizazations, lumping them both together, which is horrible in my opinion, because the tensile strength of concrete, I'm sure you know, is 1/10 of the compressive strength, as opposed to, if you look at plastic, the compressive strength and the tensile strength may be more even. And so why would you force the limitations of concrete onto plastic and vice versa? Just two completely different materials. And then you have other groups like Fast Brick Robotics who want to be included in 3D printing. And now if you rewind to 1940, you have William E. Herschel, who was the first to deposit concrete in a circle. He built a robot that goes around. I did a voiceover of the whole video, put it on my YouTube channel, and it's explaining how it's not quite 3D printing because it doesn't have a digital file. So he designed a robot that went around in a circle, but it doesn't have a tool path that you can adjust or change beyond the radius of the circle. The modern 3D printers, you can make any custom shape, square, octagon, custom walls, parametric design. But many will argue without the digital design aspect, it's not quite 3D printing. So I would say I just tried to present all the different perspectives of different people I've heard to you at once. So you could pick your favorite and go with it.
Yeah, no, I remember that video, and I think I reached out to you and asked you if that was authentic or not. I got to check out your video on YouTube of you of you commentating on that. I didn't realize you
on the Herschel. Herschel is a kitchenware products company now. They do engineering and they make like kitchen automations, chopping, slicing, blending, and stuff. So the YouTube channel has this old video, 10 years old, of the 1940 footage, black and white and then colorized.
Right.
William E. Herschel printing the buildings. Apparently they're in some state, I forget where. One is in like dilapidated shape. The other one has a warehouse built on top of it. I was talking to the grandson of the guy who was going to try to put me in touch with the owner, but it didn't quite work out. Maybe someday.
I gotcha. All right. So yeah, there's you unloaded a lot of stuff on that. Yeah. 3D printing. What is 3D printing? Yeah.
With a digital toolpath that can be customized and then deposited into some print volume into the exact replica of the digital file, in a way that you can change the digital file and create a new object, a one-off without the need for form work. Sometimes people use print support. Sometimes people print in powder beds. So there's all kinds of different print volumes or print mediums that you can print, metal, wood, polymer combinations, chocolate. People print all kinds of things. I do think it's important to then split it up into different categories: endothermic, exothermic to start off with. One takes heat to happen, the other releases heat. And yeah, I guess that's where I think the line is, or the lines are, but people are going to disagree with that for sure.
Yeah. And we were talking a little bit offline about a particular company that I kind of admire, and I think we may, with your definition of 3D printing, it sounds like you're more into what's going on, I guess, what we would call at the site, right? So to you, 3D printing would be at the site, not necessarily.
To me, 3D printing is an arbitrary term.
Yeah.
So I'm not interested in, like, I think it's abused and people like mess up the categories too much.
Yeah.
So that's why my brand is Automate Construction, because it's really about what's taking a significant portion of the human labor going in on the construction site and replacing that human labor, not the management, not taking pictures of stuff, but the actual placing pieces of the house that are going to be there for 100 years,
right?
Or whatever building it is or whatever structure it is. And so, yeah, Picus certainly fits that category.
Yeah. But they're printing off at a facility.
That's true.
Prefabbing and then bringing it to the site, which you could argue that does reduce labor that's going on at the site, but labor overall, right? But there's still Yeah.
Like all iron products, pretty much all steel or iron is going to be manufactured off-site and then delivered on-site. So
Yeah.
it's just a solution. And the problem with that, the reason I don't cover a lot of off-site, is because they bring it on-site, assemble it, and say, look, it only took 10 hours on-site. That's automation. But you go to their factory, they got a bunch of guys with hammers, and they have no computers, no robots. They don't even have iPhones. They got flip phones, and they're all wearing jeans and boots and working as hard as they can, which is great, but it's not automation. So it's like shifting the labor from on-site to off-site. A lot of people will call that automation, but there are a few companies, Picus is a great example, using robots off-site, shipping them on-site. Another one is Bot Built. They're doing framing with 2x4s, and they have the robots adjusting the 2x4s to straighten them out, tack them, screw them in, cut them too. They got saws. It's really an impressive operation, but all kinds of like that's not 3D printing at all. Then you have Boxable as well with their unfolding houses. They're trying to increase the manufacturing supply chain or the manufacturing automation all the time. They started off with a $3 million Porsche contract to design their manufacturing line, and that got them to like one house a week, and then they tripled capacity, and now they're I think close to 600 or 700 units.
Yeah. Yeah, you made me smile when you were saying that. Hey, this is kind of my beef with precast concrete is that they say they save them a bunch of time, and you hit it on the head. There is they're doing some work prior to that, right? They're fabbing, but prior to that, and then bringing it to the site. So those posts that I see where they're like, "Oh, we erected this building in 2 months," and I'm like, "No, you didn't." You forgot about the 10 months of prefabrication that you did prior to that. But anyways, that's a little dig to my precast friends out there. I know you're listening.
Well, so the problem with printing is they'll say how long it took to print the house. They'll say it took 2 weeks, 3 weeks to print a house, or 24 hours to print a house. But they're only measuring the active print time where the printer is moving. And even if you're working on a plastic print, there's a lot more time that goes into it, preparing it, downloading the file, prepping the file, planning the file. In construction, it's 10 times more than that because you have all the permitting to get through, and the printing is only the walls of the house. So, I mean, the biggest issue with 3D printed construction, if you want to clip this section and use it as the problem with 3D printed construction, is that the material has way more concrete than traditional concrete. So a regular house might have 15% concrete or 20% concrete. Most 3D printed houses have upwards of 30 or 40% cement in their concrete. Mm-hmm. So if you have so much cement in the concrete, it's going to be more expensive than a mix that has much less cement. And then they also use additives like fly ash and slag, which used to be really cheap, but now they're getting bought up by the big concrete companies, and they're becoming expensive because of the BS carbon accounting. Apparently, the coal and iron byproducts are zero carbon emissions. I don't know how that works, but the printing is only handling the walls, which is 8 to 12% of the construction process, the framing itself, not including the insulation, not including the roof, not including the floors, not including all that other stuff. So when you look at the completed cost, nobody's sharing how much it costs to 3D print a house publicly, but in private, general contractors will share numbers with me of projects they've seen for things like Habitat for Humanity and other nonprofit groups that aren't influenced. They're not a startup that's raising equity based on the low price they're building houses. And they say that it's about 40% more expensive than traditional construction. And it's good to give a percentage because construction costs vary so differently region to region. One place might have cheap roofing, one place might have cheap flooring. But if you just give an overall average for the things that will apply to a 3D printed house the same way they'll apply to a regular house, you get kind of a good estimate. When you consider that something that should only be 8 to 12% of the cost to begin with, the framing, ends up being a house that costs 40% more, the math on that is a 4 or 5x in cost of the category. And it's not all in that category. So if you look at the cost to print the walls, it might even look like it's on par, but the costs are increased in other places. Your walls are going to be heavier, so you'll need a thicker foundation. Your walls are going to have a really thick bead of concrete with supports in between, so you can't use solid fill insulation. You need to use some kind of loose fill or spray foam insulation. That's adding cost too. Your framing still needs to be done in between your windows because the walls are ribbed. You need a flat surface to mount your windows, your doors. your roof still needs to be mounted, and all your subcontractors, unless you have great relationships with them, are going to be throwing change orders at you because they've never seen it before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always when this thing was really, the few years back, and we had labor shortages and material shortages, and there was the concern is still there for a little bit, not as bad as it was. And then as the concern about affordable housing, and I was like, I never saw like 3D printing as solving those problems. Maybe can you speak to that? Maybe I guess the question to me is: are we using that technology for the right problem? Is there a better problem that it could solve?
I think a lot of people are finding smaller solutions along the way, which is great for them. There's all kinds of products that can be produced, civil engineering, construction projects, and just flower pots and smaller things like that, statues and whatever parametric designs people want that are just totally one of a kind, where you're not going to see it anywhere else. Nobody's going to have the same thing. It's just not my primary concentration. Like, I want to see commercial buildings and residential buildings, and I want to see it done with automation and 3D printing. I mean, I'm very hopeful for it. So I have pretty much dedicated my whole career to construction automation, and 3D printed construction is at least 80 or 90% of the videos I've done. And that's because it's tackling the biggest portion of the construction process compared to when I look at other automation technologies that are drawing lines on the ground or some drone flying over. They're not even replacing any real labor. They're adding info for management, but construction's had a declining productivity per person for years. So every other industry, productivity per person is skyrocketing. There's going to be something that does it. 3D printing has immense potential if you can get the material cost down. If you can be on par with traditional concrete, then a few more decades of labor costs rising, and it's almost no doubt it'll be more cost effective eventually.
Yeah, I understand you got to take steps and things like that, but I was like, I was looking at real quick. We had Advanced Construction Robotics on a podcast before, and
Nice.
how they were tackling the laying out rebar, right?
They said they're not ready for mine yet.
What's that?
They told me they're not ready to do mine yet.
Oh, no, they are. I would think they are. I've seen I think, I don't know. Anyway, so it's
not because they're not like, they just don't want to share it with I'm sure they will soon.
Yeah. And there might be things that you would ask that I didn't ask. But anyways, tackling jobs that are dangerous was kind of the thing that popped in my head that would be great for automation to solve, because there's a premium on doing that type of work. So to me, I think that's what I was getting at, Jarett. I was just doing a bad job of asking you, is when I got really frustrated is they went after what I think is the simplest thing to build on the home is the walls, right? And I was like, that's not going to get us anywhere. You're never going to beat they can't build the houses cheap or fast enough or cheap enough. So I always thought that was just a waste of effort and resources to chase that versus.
I think you just got to start somewhere. Once you get the robot on site, you got cameras on site, you're collecting data, and that's all going to help you so much long term, because you'll plug that all into TensorFlow, have AI analyze the whole thing, and just having that data, even from stuff you did wrong, is going to be what teaches you how to do it right.
Yeah, fair enough.
It's going to cost a lot of money, and a lot of investors are going to lose, and a few are going to win big.
Yeah. So you think that we're going down the right path as far as focusing on the homes like we are?
As many investor dollars can be raised towards construction automation and spent on throwing spaghetti at the wall, trying stuff that nobody's tried before, figuring out how to rethink huge chunks of the process at once, not just screwing in this nail or replacing this piece of how the process used to work. the process should be rethought from the ground up if it's going to be fully automated to like the nth degree.
Right. And do you is that what you think? That's the direction we're going? Is it just going to be automated?
It's just a matter of how long it takes. Like in 1,000 years, for sure. If humans are still around, we'll have that. In my lifetime, I don't know. In 5 years, certainly not. In 10 years, certainly not. 20 years, I would say almost certainly not. But if it happens, I don't know what I'll make videos after that. So
right,
it takes a while.
Do you see the United States as leading the way, or do you see another country that's making bigger strides?
My very first videos were in China. I visited Winsun 3D, who had invested $300 million in 2019. I bought a camera in Hong Kong and filmed my first couple of YouTube videos. They charged me $30 to film like the facility. Some guy gave me a tour. Everybody in charge wasn't there that day, so I just kind of had like free reign to the facility. See, like they had a ton of buildings, dozens of them. One big commercial building, 4 stories under construction, and then one 5-story apartment building that was prefabricated. It's like some of the biggest projects I've seen, and like the biggest facility of the most prints I've seen still to this day. And then Europe was a huge innovator in especially the Netherlands, like TU, Eindhoven, and Dresden, and a bunch of other universities in Europe. Academically, I guess Europe was an innovator, and also some of the European printer manufacturers have sold more printers in more countries than anywhere else in the world. America is very concentrated on America. So, yeah, I wouldn't say that America is the only player or even like by far the most dominant. I think right now in 2024, they're the most construction automation activities happening in the States. In pre-2019, I would say it was happening mostly in China, and then it was Europe until 2022. And then since 2022, the USA has been a hotspot for construction automation. And you even see companies like Fast Grip Robotics, who was a public company on the Australian Stock Exchange, moved to Florida. So now they're headquartered in America. They'll be selling printers in America. And hopefully I'll head down there pretty soon.
Cool. And do you think the U.S. is becoming the centerpiece of automation just because of there's money?
Yeah. What do you think?
We print money like it's nobody's business. So, they seem to, what was the group that was building the barracks down in Texas?
Icon.
Okay. Cause they got a bunch of government money to do that, right?
Yeah, I believe they did. They did deals with NASA. They did deals with the military. They did all kinds of government stuff. I'm wondering, because you have much more construction tenure than me. I've less than 1 decade. You got 2 at least. So have you seen other technologies that, let's say 20 years ago, were emerging and stuff that people were really excited about? Like, this might change the game. And then either it got integrated and it's just so common it's not interesting, or it didn't get integrated and it was like a big nothing burger.
I would say the 2 things pop into my head when you say things like that. So the first thing is concrete pumping. I think that's made a lot of strides in the last 2 to 3 decades.
Cool.
I mean, that wasn't commonplace, say 40 years ago, and we sure the heck didn't know what we were doing back then. And now I think people are appreciating what it takes to pump concrete. And I've had conversations lately with folks that are there's admixtures, additives that you can add to concrete pumping so that performs even better, and we can do even. I mean, I've been on a job that we pumped concrete through 600 foot of hose, which I didn't even think was possible when I was on the project. I was like, what? We're going to do what? So, I think that's made big strides. And then I would say the machines that we're using right now, laser screeds and things like that for floor flatness, that taken the place of some finishers and things like that. I think that took some while for folks to invest in that.
How does the laser screed work? I don't know about that.
So you set up like a laser on a tripod nearby, and you set up. It's like setting up. I'm sure the 3D printers do this. So you set up like a control point. How does 3D printing work as far as that?
Some of them do. Icon's new Phoenix printer and the Fastbrick robotics systems have a boom where it's laser leveled so that it can adjust for the boom sway and remember its position. Some printers just are so sturdy. They have like 2-ton blocks that every anchor, they just trust it's not going to move. So once they have it calibrated, they assume that it's just going to stay in position, which gets them messed up sometimes. Sometimes the rain will come, wash the sand under the anchor. One anchor goes off by 1 degree and everything's twisted.
Oh, yeah, that sounds. So yeah, it's kind of the same thing as you set up a laser and in the machine that you actually use to screed the concrete is in constant communication with whatever elevation that's at. So it knows what elevation to do, and they can do really cool things like not just do flat, but do control the machine so it does like 3D
Drains.
Things like that. Yeah, it's really, really cool.
How flat can they get?
What's that?
How can they get, like within a millimeter, or how flat does it get?
That's a great question. We follow ACI. ACI has different degrees of what we call floor flatness and floor levelness. So the ones that are you go from like a typical building is what we would call a 25 floor flatness and 35 floor levelness, all the way up to, you can get up to 100, and those are like the super flats. So typically that's when you see folks using those machines. And to be honest, I'm not well versed in how flat those things can go, but that's when you really see the guys that are that specialize in those super flat floors. Though that's when you see those, you just can't do it without it. So, and then
houses look a lot nicer with a very flat floor. They can compensate for an uneven layer by just doing a really thick first layer, because the printer will be perfectly flat. So it'll just extrude extra and stay while the floor distance is moving. It'll just fill in extra concrete, but it looks kind of ugly. So if the floor is perfectly even, especially like your friends at Picus get really clean, even layer lines. If you have one error in 100 perfect layers, it sticks out like a sore thumb. But if every layer has imperfections, it's like, it just looks like a 3D printed wall. So it, like, I don't know, there's a big difference between, like, it's like the level 3 versus the level 5 drywall finish.
Yeah. Usually residential guys aren't really concerned about flat floors. The guys that do those, they're just trying to bang it out. So I would say that pumping and the laser screed are the two like latest technologies, I think. Other than, there's that is exactly well or used across the board. There's other technologies out there, chemicals and things like that people are starting to use and things like that, but those aren't widely adopted.
What about a fail one that didn't work out as well as people were hoping it would? It's hard to remember. Out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, no, nothing pops into my head. I mean, you've been, working on this for a while now, and you've watched us from the outside. We're slow adopters. So everyone's.
For reference, the Katerra collapse happened right before I got interested in construction automation. So I don't know if that feels recent or a long time ago to you, but Katerra was like the big construction automation company before I was doing any kind of journalism. They had raised so much money, and you know them, right?
Yeah, they were the guys that were, they like did it all, right? They did the design, the engineering, and built it.
Glass, steel, timber, they wanted to do it.
Yeah. There was some other, there was trying to remember that.
So I haven't really seen anything go bust yet.
As far as?
Like, I haven't seen any companies go under. Like, Katerra was the big construction automation company that went under.
Uh-huh.
I haven't seen any. I haven't seen any firms raise a bunch of money to do construction automation. You have some firms like Diamond Age who raised a bunch of money for 3D concrete printing, built 20-something homes on site, and then I guess something happened where the C-suite moved out, got replaced, and it seems like they're doing off-site prefab now instead of on-site printers. So that's a retooling or a pivot, not quite a like what happened to Katerra. But
yeah, I viewed that as kind of like an outsider trying to get in and didn't have I think the companies I respect that are doing this automation is that they've got some folks in there that have been in the industry for decades, and then they can be like, try to balance it out a little bit. Again, it's great to have people really interested in construction to a point that they want to bring in these new technologies and get us thinking in different ways. But I think you got to have someone in there that's been in there for a while and say, hey, that maybe this is not the direction to go, and make sure we're tackling the right challenges, I guess, is kind of like. So when I see people fail like that, I'm like, that was an outsider.
Yeah, every team should have somebody with at least 1 or 2 decades of experience.
Yeah, exactly. Well, cool, man. Well, that 30 minutes went quick. I told you it would. Is there anything else that you want to hit on before we go? I definitely want to tell people to check out is your YouTube channel Automate Construction?
I think it is. My name is Jarett Gross, and the title of the YouTube channel is Jarett Gross, but I think I put it in as @Automate Construction, and then there's the Automate Construction podcast, and every platform wherever you're following people is @Automate Construction pretty much, so you can find me there. I don't know if this is the one thing I would want to plug, if you can include this, is that if people want to get involved in the 3D printed construction industry, I started a website, humanrobotarmy.com, where they can submit their resume, and I'll connect them with a 3D printed construction company in either America. We have a couple companies in the Middle East, one in Europe. So if people are interested in specifically 3D printed construction, mostly like hard work and labor roles on site, guys, like you said, with 10 years experience, 20 years experience, or people with who are just getting started. A lot of the companies want those hardened people. Like, you want to have a combination of both, because people are learning totally new skills. And if you have all people who are set in their ways, you get it's hard to innovate. You want like one leader who knows all the details of how things used to be, and then a bunch of young, hungry guppies who are going to fuck everything up and kind of make a mess that somebody can clean up who's responsible.
There you go. Perfect. Yeah, no, definitely. I'll put that link in the show notes. I was checking out your website this morning. I saw that. So, well, Jarett, thank you for coming on the show. I'm glad we finally got to speak. And and folks, until next time, let's keep it concrete.
Awesome.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Concrete Logic Podcast. If you got value from the show, here's how you can provide value back to support the show. Visit concretelogicpodcast.com and click the donate button to send value back. All dollar amounts are truly appreciated. And now, to close out the show, here's Mike Dunton.
That alarm always sings couple hours before the sun comes up. Open up the side, put some diesel in the lights, and wait till the trucks roll up. Yeah, this ain't how most folks live their lives, dripping in sweat, working overtime. But while they tie their ties for their 9 to 5s, we're out here changing these skylines with wood, iron, and mud. Something you can't prove. Hard work calls for a drink or two. Expect more, it's written in our blood. of pine. Good old boys and girls who ain't afraid of getting dirty for a clean time. And if you want to see the fire in a grown man's eyes beneath the hot summer sun, find the wild-eyed boys clocking days and nights, working hard to get that job done with wood, iron, and mud. We work hard for a dollar, give thanks to the Lord above. The color of our collars ain't white or blue, we're all gray collar through and through. Expect more, it's written in our blood. With wood, iron, and mud. With wood, iron, and mud. We work hard for a dollar, give thanks to the Lord above. Never make a man do something you can't prove. Hard work calls for a drink or two. Expect more, it's written